my foundation of instructing is when someone asks why, you need to have that answered for them. It's a respect. It's nothing. It's the basis and foundation of a respect between an instructor or a mentor and people below them, whether you're a subordinate, whether you're a student, it doesn't matter. You need to have some of those answers. This job consists of every day, the most dangerous aspect that you could ever think of, which is life and death. But it dials way more back, even further than that, to the extent of legality. We have to be liable. So if you're going to be asking your people to go out, do something that puts their life, their family's life, their well-being, their financial, their retirement, you have to respect and be able to answer them to say, hey, if I'm going to ask you to go do that, you need to understand why.
Hey guys, if you missed out on the last conference in Nashville, Tennessee, you don't want to miss out on the next one. It's April 28th through May 3rd, Orlando, Florida, the Gaylord Palms Resort and Convention Center. You made a mistake missing the last one. You don't want that to happen again on this one. 5 days of some of the best training you're ever going to experience packed into one event. We have an early bird special right now, $50 off. Use 24 early bird on our website, streetcop.com. Look for the conference, click the link, register today. If you want to get significantly better at this profession in 5 days, don't dare miss out on the 2024 Street Cop Conference.
111, 110.
Training to be a street cop.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Street Cop Training Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Street Cop Training. My name is Dennis Benino, and we have with us one of our newest instructors, Chance Cooper, but he's been instructing for a while, and we're taking this opportunity to introduce Chance and the amazing training that he has. We're glad that he's on our team. It's a whole new dynamic. It's something we haven't gone down before. It is tactic training. It's very, very important. It's very good. He's one of the best in the business at it. So without further ado, thank you for being here today, my brother. And tell me about who you are, what you do, where you grew up, your whole bio.
Well, that was quite the intro, man. I appreciate it. Chance Cooper, I've been a cop in the Kansas City Metro for a little over a decade. Like I said, I just kind of tell people I've done a lot, seen a lot, been very blessed. And I shut my mouth pretty quick and learned to listen to a lot of mentors. And I was blessed to have a lot of people take me under their wing. And from there, got to be a part of task force and teams and do some pretty awesome stuff. Saw a lot of my instructor stuff comes from things not to do. Saw a lot of that and kind of based a lot of my my foundation of instructing is when someone asks why, you need to have that answered for them. It's a respect. It's nothing. It's the basis and foundation of a respect between an instructor or a mentor and people below them, whether you're a subordinate, whether you're a student, it doesn't matter. You need to have some of those answers. This job consists of every day, the most dangerous aspect that you could ever think of, which is life and death. But it dials way more back, even further than that, to the extent of legality. We have to be liable. So if you're going to be asking your people to go out, do something that puts their life, their family's life, their well-being, their financial, their retirement, you have to respect and be able to answer them to say, hey, if I'm going to ask you to go do that, you need to understand why. Because if you can understand why and you build them, then you create better people around you. I learned that because I had people that didn't do that and kind of did the whole, well, we do it because we tell you to. And naturally I said, okay, but it never made sense. Then started being around more people that would explain why. And it just grew to realize that I've got a capability of helping and reaching people on a different level. And I love it. I love doing it, man. So vehicles became a big part of what I do. I seem to kind of get that niche. The task force I was involved in, we did a ton of vehicle work. We weren't getting a lot of, due to liberal prosecutors and commanders and all this, that we weren't getting a lot of search warrants for residences. So we said, okay, well, Fourth Amendment is a little bit more lax. We have a lot more leniency on vehicle application. So we started doing that, but we then found out we needed to adjust how we were doing it. We kind of went to the drawing board and said, let's dial this back a little bit. And we came up with a way that was very effective in not only catching bad guys, but also how to process evidence, how to work with people, and how to help cases, because it does no good. I mean, it's fun and dandy. You know, whenever I was blessed to be a cop when you could chase cars, and yeah, that was fun, but it always seemed that the guys got, people were out of jail before the pursuit was, before your paperwork was even done. And then I lived through the whole thing where you were catching more paper for discipline on car chases than bad guys were for breaking the law. So I said, okay, well, that's a problem. Let's come up with a better solution that's more effective. And we became more focused on how do we effectively make long-term cases more effective and build those. Therefore, it helped us out in the long run. So that's what a lot of this, the foundation of this course is based on, and a lot of my curriculum.
So what happened that caused you to say, okay, we need to change this and make it better?
Not naming agencies, not naming 3-letter agencies, but I was probably 3 days on this task force, as much as the FNG you could do. And we were a pretty high tempo task force. We had everything from high risk fugitive apprehension to counterterrorism to drug cartels. I mean, we kind of did it all. Like I said, it was just, I can't explain the magnitude of those men and women that I was blessed to be a part of and learn from. But very quickly with all of that, I said, there wasn't a way that I could learn. Like, I'm sitting there watching saying, okay, how do we do this? And really wasn't well, we're going to do it this way. It was just figure it out. That's what I was told. So as I kind of went on, let's figure out a better way of doing it. And we had some things kind of go south and things were justified, but there just is always a better way of doing it. And I kind of came up with in my mind a thing of, just because you can doesn't mean you should do it. Just because you're legally able to do something doesn't mean that that's the best approach. So I kind of took that backseat of just watching and learning. And then as my number got called more and more to take leadership roles, to take a lot, I'm naturally more of a tactician. So take more of that role. I started saying, okay, if this is going to be my steward and I'm going to send men and women to do a dangerous job of this, we're going to do this a little bit better. And we did. So it just evolved into a very, very effective system. And I just call it a system. There's not really a way to do it. It's actually pretty simple. I've now taught this all over the country. And whether I've been on the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, the North, at the end of these things, the notion is we should have been doing this all along. It's like, because we all know it. We know the answer, just nobody's put it together. And so I feel bad that it's like I get to do this. I don't feel bad that I get to go and, make money and, do this as a business now. But at the end of the day, I'm not lose the fact that we're training people who go do this every single day and do a dangerous job. And we have the tools. Let's just figure out how to piece them and sew them together.
I don't think the ask is a high one to get the training that people need, especially when considering most people spend $40,000 to $100,000 on a college degree that's useless. I don't feel guilty taking money because, number one, I know that it's worth 10x the value that you're going to get in return. What it does for people is profound. And, you have to understand that your time is valuable as well. We spend a lot of time behind the scenes working on our programs. And, nobody goes to work for free. And we spend a lot of time and pay a lot of emotional tax of the work that we're doing, put a lot of effort into putting this stuff. So I wouldn't feel guilty, and I don't feel guilty. As a matter of fact, that there is a price to pay to come in and learn the skills that you're willing to teach. If the government cared enough, we could depend on them to fund us. But essentially, we don't have massive government contracts where they're covering the bill for all cops. It'd be a different story. So in order for us to get to more cops, when it's broken down and you can understand that when we procure revenue, I can hire more people and put more content out. I can have more people on more platforms. I can have more reach. I can attract better instructors and bring these people to fruition. And most of it's actually not for me. Like 95% of it's not beneficial to me personally for like my financial gain. I think people tend to begin to understand it. But of course, there's that judgment that we often fear, any of us, when we're receiving money for something that you would think would be a part of the curriculum of what you would learn as a police officer. But unfortunately, it's not. So we have an option. We can either take money and give you what we got, and it's not a lot of money, or we could just not do it. And, so there's this burden of judgment, I think, that we all grow up with and experience as human beings that you have to just kind of shun off. And the people who want a product like yours, and it's so important to them, they are not your non-believers. They're gladly ready to invest. And I say invest, not spend. Invest in for what you charge or what we charge, whatever it may be. The investment is well worth your life. There's no question about it. But you keep kind of beating around the bush a little bit. Let's get into like what tactics and things are you talking about? Because I don't want people to, they're probably sitting here going like, well, what does he fucking teach? So let's go into that a little bit.
So anything in vehicles, when I say vehicles right now in my world, as far as vehicles in law enforcement, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of things. And it's so tactics. You ever want to get and see a weird world, get into the world of law enforcement, military tactics and the instructors, because everybody's got an opinion. I feel like you want to go to the upper echelon of that, start including vehicles in it, because that's where everybody starts to have even more of an opinion, because vehicles induce a greater variable, which is things rapidly evolve and change. You have outside influences that you can't adapt for. So what I'm talking about with this program is for patrol officers, part-time SWAT teams and such, people who would find themselves in some sort of a critical incident that involves vehicles, which is 99% of what we do. We respond, we drive, everything we do revolves around vehicles. And yet I call it the 225 bench press, the staple high critical vehicle operation that we should ace. Like there should be no question. It should be everybody can do it, is a felony car stop. And yet there's so much that's missed on a felony car stop that when I've talked and traveled and seen like, why do we still do that? There's nothing more than just my policy says that we have to do it this way, or we do it because it's how we've always done it. And a case in point. So here's my awesome little, I didn't know how to share my PowerPoints and stuff, right? So case in point is going to be something like this. This is like a normal, yeah, I know this is going to be memeified, right? But
well, you're going to have to try to explain it too, because I think people are listening to this as they're driving. So there's three police cars behind a suspect vehicle lined up, essentially.
Been a part of hundreds, if not probably thousands of these, where you have a suspect vehicle and then you have 3 police cars behind it, because on a normal pursuit, you have a primary, secondary vehicle, and then you have the support elements. K9, other officers, everybody gets in on it because it's a lot of fun. Well, the problem is that if you go to basic SWAT school 101, or if you go to any sort of hey, we have shots fired at this thing, the first thing they're going to tell you is that you got to contain. And yet I've been on, I don't even know how many felony car stops where what they're looking at is there's at least 1 car length between your vehicle and the suspect vehicle. And the problem is that that's how we're teaching it. And yet we are not addressing that. Whenever this happens, people bail out and run out. And so you have a crime scene, because the car is a crime scene. You have an unknown suspect who's ran one way, possibly another suspect who's run another way. So in essence, because of how we're teaching this, we've created a bigger problem for the public, because now you're chasing them either through crowded streets, through commercial. I've chased people into stores before because they ran into stores. So now you're creating a bigger public risk, because we don't want to address the writing on the wall, which is our primary thing that we should be teaching, and you should be day one on the street, day one out of the academy is, if you're doing this, you have to contain them inside of the vehicle. You have to do that. And the reason why is because you keep them there. You want to contain the problem to the smallest amount of space. So that way you can control it. So I don't understand why that's missed, but that's essentially the foundational of what we're going to address, is saying, hey, everybody has seen this because we've all been a part of this, but we all know that there's other things, that there's tons of stuff wrong with it. I mean, we could nail down the whole thing that there's wrong with it, but yet we don't address, okay, well then what's the solution? And the solution we came up with was what you're looking at here is the same thing, but what's called a peace sign or whatever, where you have the outside vehicles pinning the vehicle. Now they're not making positive contact, because I know commanders who are watching this or listening are going to be throwing the fits, because it's like, well, there's literally policies out there that any sort of touching, Dennis, I'm talking kissing like that, and their policy is considered lethal force, and those officers are then disciplined for potential lethal force. I've read the policies, and any contact with a police vehicle with another suspect's vehicle is considered lethal force. So
Whoa.
People think that they don't.
Where is that, dude?
I can't.
What state?
Indiana. Indiana's one. Indiana's one.
Wow.
But so when I was talking to those guys about this, I'm saying, well, then why do you have to touch the vehicle. Yeah, we did, but we had big bumpers and, reinforced stuff like that. But why not just get close enough that you can then make them second guess getting out and running vehicles? Or if they do, if they start ramming your cars and stuff, they've already initiated that. So therefore, problem solved. And so when we're talking foundational vehicle tactics, it's going to be going over addressing. So like my lecture is foundational. Hey, here's the foundation if we've got to contain first. Contain them there. And I've heard things like, well, you're so close and then you're going to get in a shootout. And I'm like, well, our basic qualification and our basic interaction with suspects are two feet away. Therefore, we practice and qualify 2 to 3 feet away on a draw because that's what we are trained to do. Street cops, beat cops on the East Coast, we don't have the streets like you guys do. Like you guys have a beat that you walk and stuff like that a lot on the East Coast. We don't. But yet you qualify at that. So therefore, we should be expected to be able to take high percentage shots at that distance also, because you're looking at 2 to 5 yards. And so there's a lot of excuses we have when we start introducing things like this to commanders and people when they say, hey, well, we can't do that because we don't know how. So I'm like, okay, let's teach you how. Let's apply some basic principles, go for movements, go for this is where we need to go. Because there's there's so much out there. Like immediately fighting to the back of the vehicle. Well, we saw that, but the problem is that when you have a lot of ambient noise in an urban city, you can't give commands because there's so much going around. They can't hear you. And so it's like, okay, well, how do we address that? So we came up with something called 3 principles of control, which is going to be primarily dominating that space first. Whatever space you're in, you dominate that with your gear, with your pre-planning, with a lot of different stuff. You dominate the assess, and then you fix your problem. So, and I know I'm speaking, I'm not sure if I'm kind of going down the road that you're wanting to on all of this, but those are
That's right. You're good.
As far as what this course does.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. It's a lot of vehicle stuff, and the vehicle thing is not just fighting. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of courses I attended that focused on kind of the fighting around vehicle. The problem is that when you're conducting these felony car stops, you're not fighting yet. You're conducting an operation the same way that you're conducting an arrest. You're conducting potentially a high risk investigation. You're not fighting yet. So if you treat it as such, you've set yourself up that now you have to retake ground because you may not be at that level of force yet. Remember, everything we do has to be on a use of force continuum. We match their force. So it's dispelling that rumor of like every time you're doing this, you're fighting around a vehicle. No, how about we teach them how to fight around a vehicle if you need to fight? But a lot of that is pre-planning yourself, how to set yourself up for success. So that way, when it comes, you've stacked the odds in your favor. And a good example I give is, why do we sit in the back of a restaurant with our back to why do we face the door? Why do we sit there and face the door? Because we want to see what's happening in front of us and eliminate what's behind us. It's the same thing. We're pre-planning because you can't counter an ambush. That's a big thing that kind of goes around the vehicle world, Dennis, is countering an ambush. And not diving into the weeds on that, but it's hard to counter a sucker punch if I know that if I don't have eyes in the back of my head and I don't know it's coming. That's the reason why I glitch move, is because they know that I'm at my most vulnerable. So my question is to law enforcement is like, why do we set ourselves up to be the most vulnerable? Which I'm showing in the pictures, guys, those who are listening. I'm showing the picture of the bad way of conducting a car stop. Why do we set ourselves up for failure to already stack our complex problems that we have to deal with? Why not start eliminating a lot of those problems? And that's what we show, is how to do that, and some principles to do that you don't even have to. It's not like a big policy change in your agency. You can just start doing them. You're covered in case law because you're still covered under the same use of force that we are normally. You should be covered under most policies because you're conducting this in a way that is modifying the normal way of doing it, just stacking things in your favor. And so on the broad spectrum of capabilities, it's enabling the normal patrol officer or part-time SWAT officer or wherever you're going to find yourself to handle a little bit more of these critical incidents that we find. And talking with some of the street cop guys, that's a great example, is like, you are great at proactive policing now. You've got guys that are trafficking drugs. They have high risk. They've got warrants. They know their heads on a swivel. They already know that they're looking for us. But now what are you going to do once they run, you chase them? What are you going to do? Well, you're in a vehicle. So let's figure out how to stack the odds in your favor. And so you shouldn't be thinking about it. It should be instinctual. This is already in place because I need to be focusing on what the threat is doing so I can address that, not the bullshit that is, how do I do this now? Because I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to get in trouble.
What are the biggest mistakes or mistake that you see people making that maybe it's a piece of advice for people that if they hear it, they can acknowledge it and maybe rectify it, and it might save some lives today? So what is that? I know we're talking about some mistakes, but maybe there's one or two or three things that you could tell people, like, right now, stop doing this, start doing this, and you're going to see a big change in the likelihood of you increasing the odds of surviving a situation that I discuss.
Get more confident in your fitness, get more confidence in your shooting, get more confidence in yourself, like take care of yourself mentally. It's the best thing that I could tell you. Dennis, my intro, I have almost probably 30 minutes talking about mental preparedness. Your proactive, that's actually what my first introduction was, your proactive policing class. Because it opened my mind that, like, I have to prepare myself mentally for what's going on. And so from that, I talk about go mentally prepare yourself for things that what you can do. One of our greatest assets we had on our task force is we knew going into it, our investigation, we stacked things in our favor because we knew we wanted to worry about you. We wanted to have all of the things available to us that we could rely on to pick whatever we needed in front of us to use. Like, you pick your tool, a good mechanic, a good somebody who works with their hands or they have all these tools that they can draw from and use it to what's in front of them. It's being well-rounded, right? And part of that is becoming physically fit, being absolutely effective with your weapon and with whatever weapon system you have, and being mentally capable of what you're doing. Because I could imagine nothing worse, because I saw this a lot, doing something and then not understanding why you did it. And then in this environment we're in, getting called to question and not being able to articulate why you did something because you were seeing black, like you were just completely tunnel visioned, or you were in some way just not prepared for it. And yet what I'm finding people are not prepared for are simple things that are calls for service. It's almost like we've given up keeping ourselves mentally prepared for things. So that way, when they're still going to happen, we're not ready for it. So that's first thing, is prepare yourself mentally, physically, and your capabilities. The next thing is going to be, because a lot of that encompasses, I see some stupid stuff like fingers on the trigger. I see a lot of, the other thing is stop making our own problems. God, I see that a lot of when we run through a lot of these scenarios, the problems that we run into, cops create themselves because we don't know how to simplify or problem solve prior to whatever we're doing. So we induce the complexity. And you and I talked about this. So when you and I just had this conversation about content, about walking through some of the things of like, hey, do this is what they did well. This is what they didn't do well. I've been doing that. And what I'm seeing consistently is we create a lot of our own problems because the suspect can do whatever they want. We have to adjust our tactics, our approach off of policy, the Constitution, and our moral and physical capabilities. And if we're not prepared mentally, physically, and with our capabilities, then we will create those problems. So I know it's like, man, what can we start soon? It's like, if you can do that, there's a lot of this common sense stuff that will just say, like, oh yeah, exactly. As far as a tactic, man, stop pointing guns at cops. I see that all the time. We get so comfortable and complacent about pointing guns at cops. And it's become my pet peeve that in my classes, I'll give people about 2 warnings until I start saying, okay, this is a problem that you can't address and identify, that you are now consistently pointing your weapon at a friendly target. And that's a liability. So stop pointing your gun at other cops.
Everything I see in law enforcement, and I think I see in just every profession, when somebody I'll try to elaborate on this a little bit. When somebody does something that is not correct, it all comes back down to one overall thing, that's a lack of training. So a couple days ago, a guy I know, it's actually a pretty famous guy in the police world, was like, hey, I want to run something past you. What do you think? And I said, okay, so as we unpack this thing, let me just also defend this cop. Because there is a very, very different thing between a person who is malicious, knew what was right and what was wrong, and chose to do the wrong thing, and somebody who goes out and tries to do the right thing, but was never taught what the right thing is and is doing their best, given what they have been offered and received from a training perspective. So essentially it was like, hey, was this allowed under the Fourth Amendment? And the answer is, well, I don't know. I have to ask more questions. But again, it sounds like we have a lot of judgment going on in this person. But the question I have for you is, did he know right and wrong? And the answer is probably not, because he got the same training you and I got. We got sent out into this world to make decisions without knowing any of the rules of how this game is played. It's so flabbergasting. I was just explaining this to a reporter yesterday who wants to do an interview, and they're on our side. And I'm like telling her, I'm like, hey, you realize that we've been given nothing, right? And I say it to my detriment, but we've given nothing, and we're expected now to do this job. We're given no direction at all. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, go to academies and don't learn a thing. And the academies know it. They just don't. They know it. Whether they want to admit it or not, 93% of these academies know that they literally send these men and women off with nothing.
Because for 10 years before they became instructors, what were they doing? The second they get somebody in their car, what would they say? They forget everything you just learned in the academy. And then they get assigned to the academy and they're saying, hey, now we got this.
It is heartwarming to see today's generation of police officers, the newer generation, actually putting a little more thought, taking some advice from us and all of our instructors here collectively, and starting to implement some of this stuff as extracurricular activity in these academies. So that's a relief in some sense, but we got a long ways to go here. But again, it's the same thing. You see these bad habits because we just go back to where they were trained, and you can see where these bad habits grew. I could tell you that there was a significant difference between the person who graduated, and I got to give a little credit where credit's due. I've said this before. Somebody who probably left the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, although I'm not saying federal jobs are great, the training center is a cut above everybody else by far, versus the guys and girls that I graduated with from my third academy at a local county academy. And like what the equipment we had was garbage. We had nothing. We had wooden red guns because they couldn't afford to give us the actual red guns, like the ones that are professionally made. So we carried around these wooden cutouts that were spray painted, and that was our fake guns. It had a little hole in the middle, it looked like a boomerang. That's how we practiced. That's the real life that we felt. And I don't know if there was, we were doing, check this out. We were doing building clearing in the gym. We took like gym mats and set them up. I remember walking, I'm like, what are we doing here? Yeah. And they made gym mats. They made like obstacle courses with gym mats, and like half of them were falling over. And I'm like, you guys couldn't get creative enough to find us a place to do this for the one day out of the 6 months that we're here. We can go to like a building and do this, like an office space that's available in the whole county. Mm-hmm. Dude, it was like nothing was realistic. I remember one day we had they brought the helicopter in, and like we had to go look at the helicopter. I'm like, are we on a class trip? You know, like you know what I mean? Like they brought the state police helicopter in, which was great, right? I get because for us, we didn't give a shit. Just like, we don't have the PT right now. We're not getting screamed at. Like, I'm like, who gives a shit what we're doing? And I just to myself, like, why is everything that we're doing here like a class trip? We were like doing like demonstrations for kids as recruits. We were like crossing children. Like, what are we dude, we had so check this out. Here's another one we did. They didn't have real life courses. Now I'll give the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center again another credit. They have a lot of resources. So what we did was, this is my third academy. To learn traffic direction, they taped off they took the gym, they taped off the gym, or they made like pretend barriers. And so you'd stand out in the middle of the gymnasium, and people would put their hands up like this. Like, imagine if you're not watching this video, palms up. And if you went like this, that's your right blinker. And if you went like this, like a wave, like you do to kids, that's your left blinker. So you'd stand in the middle, and your friends would walk through these mock streets that they taped, like they made just tape, like they just made tape grid on the gymnasium floor, and you'd walk over, and they were showing you how like Like blow the whistle and like point them that way. And that's how we learned how to do traffic control. Your friend would walk up and like do a right signal or a left signal, up to the recruit what he wanted to. Dude, our evasive driving was in like a parking lot. Like they set up cones and like we literally.
Why couldn't they have used real cars in the parking lot to do blinkers and such?
Dude, you right? Could you imagine like you couldn't find just a big empty space, and you could have just had cars like cone that up. Dude, our like we didn't even have pursuit driving. They had like, I don't know, they call it like something cross or something like, I don't know what it was. Going from the federal law enforcement training center, where I give them credit again, pursuit driving there is fantastic. I mean, like, dude, really do it. Yeah, they do a really nice job there. It's really, really well thought out. They have the resources again. But this is the problem is like nobody's willing to pull their resources together and create one great place to train. Everybody's got to have their little piece of the pie and so they did it. And the detriment is people lose their lives. They have untrained police officers. But this academy, they had like just cones set up in a parking lot at a college. And it wasn't like a big lot. And dude, like the fastest you can get the cars up to like maybe like 40 miles an hour. And then you had like hit the brakes and stop. So what's the real, the reality of that being your it's just like, dude, we were doing like these, like, dude, the federal one was so good. They taught you like how to like drive an actual obstacle course and like where the front nose of your car is, as long as you're clear on that, this side will be clear. There's so much good shit we learned. You go to this place and I'm like, this is what you got, how you guys are training in a parking lot. Like, this is what we're getting for pursuit. You want us to get in these cars and do 125 mile an hour to pursuits, but we have no training on it at all.
I still, to this day, the Kansas City Regional Training Academy's EVOC course was the best part of that. It was the best part of that academy. I, to this day, rely on lessons that that was over 10 years ago. And I still rely on those lessons I learned. And I haven't been able to go to high-speed EVOC training ever since then. But they went and they trained regularly out there at FLETC. And like, just to show your experience is this weird, can you imagine the legit, like they think they're legit. It's like you showing them, they're giving you, and you guys are like, we have to do what?
Wow. This high, like this baby high thing, like this clappy thing, right?
Yeah. Exactly. I remember I just can't emphasize it. Like I use it to this day, rely on those lessons and principles that I over 10 years ago. That's how influential and important it was in my day-to-day stuff today. And that, like, just to show checkbox training, legitimate training, where and how it pays off, just is a perfect example of right there.
I'm actually gonna do a meme or like a slide deck on 3 ways to drive better that people never taught you as a cop. So I'll give people a few ones here's some great ones that I learned at the academy, and I'll give you one extra one that somebody taught me when I was working in Washington, D.C. Maybe we'll start with that one first. When you are in traffic as a police officer, you always want to leave enough distance in front of you to be able to get the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible. Even when I'm driving my personal vehicles, I try to keep about 6 to 8 feet in traffic in front of me in case some shit hits the fan. I got to take off. Like I'm trying to get, maybe somebody's trying to carjack me or something like that. So you got to think about that. But here's some really good principles. One thing that I noticed people weren't doing when I was in pursuits with them is they don't use the entire road. So you don't realize you guys are seeing that line. You're supposed to be on the one side, but at 2, 3 in the morning and nobody else is on the road and you're in a pursuit, you can use the whole road. You're going to be okay. You'll be able to adjust over, right? But like, you got to understand physics and science. So if you're trying to stay in your, like on a one lane traffic back and forth, like you can cross over and employ the whole road and have a significant advantage in a pursuit or driving fast without putting yourself in harm's way. You're not breaking the law. We are in a pursuit or an emergency situation. That's one I don't see, dude. I don't see people using the entire roadway. I still do it with my own cars when I go a little fast. You know what I mean? Like, especially at night, I live in the country a little bit, I'm in like farm.
You got to get those reps in. Yeah.
Hey guys, follow us on all social media platforms to include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook group. We have so much information going out every single day, and we don't want you to miss out on any of that stuff. So check it out. Go give us a follow. Here's another one. You don't accelerate until your car is reset. So you don't accelerate when you're like going off on an off ramp. You don't want to be hitting the gas. You want to coast. You want to get the gas real hard, hit the brake, right? You're going to slam the brake, decrease speed a little bit, and then coast it around until your car starts to, it's called to and through. That's what they call it at the academy. So once you start getting around it, then you start beginning to accelerate again. So it's 2 and 3. So you coast through your turns. So you're supposed to go really hard, really fast, slam the brakes hard, coast through your turn, and hit the gas again and take off. You don't want to be accelerating or braking on a turn. Just let the vehicle do the work. And dude, people will shit their pants in my cars. Like, you don't realize the capability of these police cars or any car in general, how much more capable they are when a person who is driving it is capable.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that a lot of these pursuits, these guys roll cars or wipe out or whatever it may be, is because they don't know how to drive it. Dude, I caught a lot of people on a Crown Vic, which is pretty much a miracle. The Crown Vic, albeit started and the air conditioner always worked and it ran, then it was a fucking workhorse. It was a mule. It was a fucking elephant. It was the slowest shit. And if you knew how to manipulate that car, you knew that you could not come back out of second gear. If you could keep that car in second gear and above, I think it's 4 or 5 gears, you could probably win a pursuit. But if you were keep coming back down to the first took forever to get out of. So as long as you had it about 40, 45, you could kept it. If you were in a pursuit and keep it above 45 to 50, you could probably win. Once you drop below that and you have to get back into first gear, those cars were just dogs. They had no acceleration to them. Good top end, decent to keeping up on the highways. But so, I would be in pursuits as the partner in a car. And I'm like, dude, you know anything about driving? Yeah. So the car has so much more ability than you think it does. It's just that people don't know how to drive them.
No, they don't. And yet they're expected to, but yet they're not given the training. They're not given anything, but hey, at the same time, go figure it out. And it's all on you if something goes wrong.
It's wild, dude. And then they're actually doing, I remember we were my old agency, and none of these people are there anymore, but this was their solution. If you crashed a car, you would get like a verbal. The next one was a reprimand. And the third one was you would go drive a simulator at the county college that they run kids through to learn how to practice your driving. Go sit in a simulator. It wasn't like a pursuit simulator. It was like a joke. Yeah. And so people actually came back and were like, it was actually like a video game. It was kind of fun. I'm like, man, maybe I should go but only if you got in trouble could you go drive the simulator. We weren't afforded the opportunity to go train in the simulator. Only if you crashed 3 times did you get an opportunity to go sit in the simulator and try to get your skills up.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. And dude, it was just like everything was done so stupid. It's just so ass backwards. And people are listening to this going, yeah, it's how it is still. We know, and we cannot wait for them to make the change.
We know. Yeah, that's exactly why we're trying to do this. That's why I was thrilled. I was like, yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest platforms for law enforcement training, 100%. I want to be a part of that. Not only have I experienced a lot of the people that you stack the deck with, I'm like, man, I'm learning from them. And I talk to Josh. Josh and I talk all the time about stuff because I talk to him. I've learned more from him about canine stuff that I'm like, dude, I wish I would have known this 10 years ago. But at the same time, he and I've talked, and they've now implemented changes with all how they employ and change their vehicle tactic stuff, because that's another thing that people don't do is how to properly implement tool. Like I say, remember how I was saying, the whole tools, if you can have tools, if you can implement canine, that right there solves most of your problems with containment, because you could offer nothing better to a canine of saying, hey, we have this. There's a guy right there that you see dead at because of how we position. He couldn't get out quick enough. So we've got the jump on him. Go let your dog bite him. Yeah, they're going to be absolutely, but it's getting that there. It's how you get that there is what seems to be kind of what the problems missed. And so, yeah, it's like people still do all that stuff, but there's answers out there rather than just the checkbox training that you need for block training or whatever they're going to be. And I can't even tell you how much money I have spent on my own accord for better. I mean, I've bettered my resume is how I describe it now, but at the time I was just bettering myself and my squad, because I was saying, hey, if we're going to do this job and they're going to keep tying our hands on this, that's fine. But I'm not taking that as a sit down and take my ball and go home. No, I want to do this. And there's a way of doing this that makes it we could still do this and be successful. Because that's how it's always been. I mean, I've only been a cop for 10 years, but it's very rarely do things lax. It's always going to be our blinders get more and more and more narrow, that this is where we have to operate from, is what is people who are listening. It's like the horse blinders. You're rotating your head. Actually, I think I got this from like, I'm not doing like a weird like plug or anything like that, Dennis. I'm being 100% serious. I think I got this. Like, I remember taking this from you on bad guys can do whatever they want. They don't have the Constitution. They don't have any rules or regulate. They have nothing. They can do whatever they want. Our job as patrol cops were to look and find whether you want dope, whether you want DUIs, whether you want warrants. You find what it is and learn their patterns of behavior. And basically, when you get in your patrol car, you are looking for that. And this is the realm of policy, and Constitution allows you, here's my lanes that I can go hunt. And when you get good at it, you start sniffing around and stuff starts drawing your attention and you're zeroing in on it and you become smarter. So you're taking, okay, I can't control those limitations. I'm a patrol officer. I'm not going to be able to influence a captain or a chief, no matter how, and we know crazy and stupid they are. But it's like, what am I going to do? I can sit here and complain about it. I can do nothing, or I can educate myself and be a good person and a good leader and go change myself and then influence others to be more positive. Something I was always told is that I'm obnoxiously optimistic. The agency, my last agency that I was with, there was plenty of toxicity to go around. And I just got tired of feeling kind of like, woe is me. It's like, guys, we still have a job to do and we can still go do it. And it was awesome. We were successful in what we were doing, and we made the most of it. To the point, Dennis, the sheriff said no pursuits, even if you watch a homicide happen.
Wow.
You watch the homicide, the guy takes off, you cannot pursue him in any way, shape, or form. You should go handle it. And we're like, well, wait a minute. What if there's enough people to handle this and we can still go catch him? Absolutely not. So we had the thing of like, okay, are we going to risk discipline to go stop a homicide suspect? Or are we going to sit and complain? And we all had the notion of like, no, we're still going to go do it. And because the public expects it, and our moral code is fine, fire us. You're going to fire us for catching a bad guy, for catching a homicide. But that's what we were dealing with as far as policy. And we said, that's fine. If those are your limitations, hold my beer. We're going to find a way of doing this. So
it's like the conversation, and I've told a story in the past, but I'm not going to go into it now. But when these agencies cheap out and get the cars that don't go fast, they don't perform well, and people will say, well, we don't have a pursuit policy anyway. And I say to them, that's fine. You may have a zero tolerance pursuit policy, but I promise you at some point, there's going to be a pursuit. You're going to have to be able to try to catch people, and you won't be able to. You have no capability. So you'll have a zero pursuit policy until a kid gets kidnapped or a cop gets shot in the head and you got the suspect in front of you, and you can't catch him because some administrator made a decision to not get the faster cars. And there's one episode of the first 48, and I think it was out of Tulsa. And I don't mean to talk shit about Tulsa, but there was this woman who was on the run for homicides. They actually caught her with a gun. She's a young girl too. I think they got in like 3 or 4 pursuits with her, but they were driving like Ford Focuses as like detective cars, like some bullshit Ford, like not the Tauruses that were fast. It was like the lower model ones, the ones that like, whatever the fuck they have. And they couldn't catch her. Whatever she was in was continuing to outperform this murder suspect. And I think she committed another homicide in the interim. So when you make decisions to not have the equipment, they don't have to use it, but at least not have the equipment or not equip these police officers appropriately, these are the consequences that society must pay. And the crazy shit is what drives me the most insane is there's no accountability at the top level for that decision being made.
Oh, dude, keep going. I'm hang on. Just so that you know, this is what I wanted to address is exactly what you just said as I'm writing consequences at the top. I'm taking notes. Keep going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the conversation. You want to get these, you want to cheap out and get this garbage. You're going to pay for it. And unfortunately, you're giving these men and women a impossible job when you're not equipping them appropriately to try to achieve something that you can't get done unless they have the right equipment.
Like I said, the whole dominate thing, that whole principle of dominating is that you have to be equipped with the proper equipment, the proper training, and the proper your mental abilities. If you can't do that, there's no way that you're going to win a fight. And we're talking life or death, and not just physical life, like dying and deceased. I'm talking liability of your family. Because if you think about a great part I bring up is the officers in Minneapolis. They weren't the ones, and kneeling on George Floyd's neck or anything, but yet they are now criminally liable because they were influenced by what was happening, and they didn't know because you've not been there, would be like, hey man, I got this. Or, hey, I want to do something. You kind of step in and interject yourself. I'm not being a dickhead, but you know that you have that capability. And so, yeah, if you don't equip your people, it's like, how do you expect them to go do the job? Like,
But look at the consequences of not training.
Yeah,
look at the consequences of not training. People just think the consequences are dire. They literally burnt down. People don't show this on the news. They burnt down half of Minneapolis, dude. It looked like fucking Iraq. I was there not too long after all the riots subsided. It looked like Baghdad, dude. It was fucking nuts. They destroyed the place.
I was doing some stuff with some of the SWAT guys that were actually stationed out of that precinct that got raided, and what they reported were they were told to leave, and they're like, no, we are not leaving, and basically given that the command of like, no, you guys are leaving. And it's like, wait a minute, so you're giving up. And they were saying like, all of our stuff were in there, all the files of our families, there's things in there that people should not have. We have to protect this sensitive site. There's a lot of sensitive information in there. And they were like, nope. It's like, are you kidding me? Because cowards. But
it's crazy. Even you think they didn't get enough pain at Minneapolis, so they can't get anybody to work there. But now I just read something like last week or the week before that they're getting even more harsh on police officers there. Like they're cracking down on more cops there. You can't get anybody to work there. You're offering $250,000 a year salaries. You're lucky you got anybody else staying there. They're probably only staying there because they're making so much goddamn money. Yeah. And now they just employed more policies on the police. You're just going to continue to pay for this. And this is what happens when you elect complete idiots. I mean, morons at the highest level who have no business running. They couldn't run a Burger King, which is self-sufficient, nonetheless a city and making decisions. It's like literally watching the clown show. It's frightening. Government is very, very frightening when you have people who are complete morons and they're in charge. Very, very it's very scary.
So two things. This actually will go back to one of your first questions at the beginning of like, what's one thing I see that I wish I could change? And it goes into also with what we're talking about here. Your light on your weapons. I'm a big fan of patrol rifles. I'm a big fan of patrol rifles for patrol cops. If they're competent and they understand the importance of it. But in that, need proper lights on weapons. You have a ballistic advantage on a weapon of hundreds of yards. And yet most agencies put what's called a Streamlight TLR1 on it, which is designed for a pistol. It is a great weapon it's a great weapons light for a pistol, should not belong on a rifle. Thing I tell people all the time is pistol lights do not belong on rifles, because what it does is it actually hinders people. They don't realize this. It's great for like CQB or CQ, whatever you want to call it, for small stuff. But for most patrol officers, you have different varying lights, what are called photonic barriers, like different light levels everywhere, right? And different shadows that happen all over the place. You have to have the ability of piercing through all of that to say, I need to look at this right here. And I have countless stories and experiences personally, and that's outside of things I've seen in the training environment and of all the people I've trained. Anyway, weapon lights need to be what they're designed to do. That's one. And a lot of that comes from agencies saying, well, this is only $100. Well, you're now limiting their capabilities because you're taking something and limiting their capabilities of seeing past around 40 yards. That's its limitations is around 40 yards. And yet I respond on a domestic violence call and I'm stopping 4 houses up, 5 houses up, because, hey, oh yeah, stopping 2 houses in front. Everybody's like 2 houses. No, we're getting ambushed responding to these things. Stop further up and walk a little bit further. Anyway, right. So therefore I am 4 or 5.
That's another one. Let's just jump in that one real quick. I mean, I think people really need to, employ keep it a block down, keep it quiet, and walk up.
You should be turning your lights and sirens off a while before you're coming to that call. I'm talking, even if you're just down the street, you don't have to be running hot. Running hot is awesome and it's fun. We love doing it. But the whole purpose is to get traffic out of the way to get to this. If you can get there, you should be going as covert as you can, because we have to by the Constitution, we have to be announcing ourselves by when we get there. It's like, take as much advantage as you can of approaching in a stealthy manner, so that way you're addressing and finding out what you're going to be walking into. So yeah, cut lights and sirens off as fast as you can, as soon as you can. Try and have some sort of an approach that's going to allow you the most amount of time to take in what's happening around you. So, because I mean, Dennis, I mean, I'm at 8 I stopped counting at 8, because once I realized it was 8, I was like, that's enough for me. How many officers are ambushed, either responding to a legit domestic violence because they know we're coming, so you're already at a disadvantage, or we're being ambushed from calls for service that people know how to get us there, so they're going to mimic that call. Well, how do you tell the difference? Well, you can't tell the difference. There's no way, because it's all based on the intel you're getting. So you stack, like that whole dominating thing we're talking about, stack the odds in your favor going up, so that way you know what you're going to be, you are better aware of what you're walking into. And we talk about that in this class, about how responding to using your vehicle to respond to stuff. And it's hard now, like we can talk a little bit about it, and I want to. It's just hard to talk now because there's visuals, and I have a lot of videos and stuff that we can show. We can't do that here. But the notion is, stop running hot as fast as you can to hot calls, because you should be you want to take that time to stack the odds in your favor and not letting people know where you're at. They know you're coming, but let them kind of guess where they're coming, when you're coming, and where you're coming from. So,
I wanted to say one other thing, that, often you're referring to your 10-year career, 10 plus years. I had this theory, and I came up with it a long time ago. It's just me collecting data and making assessments of what I've seen in law enforcement field. I really firmly believe that there are different stages of a police officer's career, and this probably makes sense to a lot of people. I've had a lot of people agree with it, and it is my theory, and it's not based on any scientific data, just me collecting information around this career. And I believe somebody with intelligence and capabilities, starting out in field training, you're day one, you're just, the whole thing's just a very overwhelming. I would say probably towards the end of your field training program, 12 weeks in, 10 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it may be, you're like, can cover some real basic stuff. Barely can do anything. I think at your 3-month mark, you're starting to catch on a little bit. I think at 9 months, you're feeling a lot more confident. 9 months on the road, you're starting to feel a lot of confidence. You're starting to really pick up on things. I think at 3 years, you can be pretty decent at this job. And I think for anybody who's really smart, at 7 years, you can be an ace. I think 7 years of good police work, I think you are probably creme de la creme, and can probably conquer just about anything if you have that intelligence. So I think it's your 5-year mark, 3-year mark. These are all these are all interesting times. I said 3 and then the 7. 5, you're feeling like almost getting that salty feeling at 5. 3, you're still eager. You're really looking this job good. You still got some stuff to learn, but 7 is like, that's so, dude, at 10, I'm sure you have more than enough qualifications to be a profound police officer. Anybody who's a hard charger with 10 solid years on the road, I mean, speaks volumes of who you are. I think 7 is where it's at for somebody to be a real rock star cop. 7 years on the job is where you hit that sweet spot. And the great thing is, it sounds like you haven't lost much of your eagerness or your desire to go out and do police work, even with 10 plus years on the job. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
My moral compass is now to be better. I experienced a lot of, and I won't mention names about them, but I talked with Adam with his police podcast on this a lot. Is if I were to say, what is my legacy? He asked what was my legacy, and I was like, just resilience. Because we might get into some deep stuff here. I don't know if you want to go down it, but in the last 4 or 5 months, I've had to take some pretty hard phone calls from people that I know that are great people. They're good men. I'm talking great men, and they're mentally struggling. And it's a lot of based on like, I don't have my purpose and stuff. So it's like my mental resilience to keep going is based a lot on, we've got the power and influence to do good. And this platform is a great catalyst to help build people to say, not only like, do you matter? And I know it sounds real kumbaya, but it's like, not only do you matter, but there are people out there that you will influence that you will never see the fruits of your labor. because you don't get to see the fruits of how you influence that person and how you say, because you did your job professionally, you'll never get to see that. But you can take solace in the fact of, I did my job and I'm proud of it. So that way, if your number's called to the table, like mine was, I can stand on my own 2 feet and say, not only am I not going to kiss your ring, which is what I was asked to do. He said, not only am I not going to kiss your ring, I've got to risk this, and because I know my team and my guys did everything right. Well, then, whatever the outcome will be, whatever, whoever's listening to this, whatever the outcome will be, you've got to be able to stand on that moral high ground of like, these are my lines in the sand. I thought it was one thing, and then COVID hit, and now I started realizing it was other things. And I never would have thought that it came, but it did. And it was a surreal moment of like, is this really happening? I had never had any, anyway, so this goes into like a lot of personal things with my history of like, and we don't have to go into that, but because I'm telling you this around what guides me and what drives me is I think I've got a good understanding of how all this stuff works. I think we have a program that will help people make better decisions and be better cops. At the same time, help them realize like there's a lot of negativity out there and there's other ways. I know you've talked a lot about suicide with cops lately. And a lot of it is empowering them and saying, hey, all that BS that you're hearing, it's not true. You're better than that.
It's not true.
It's not true. It's better than that. You're better than that. And you find ways of figuring it out and going from there. And the best thing I ever did was when I went and talked to somebody, and they made me realize a lot of my identity I had wrapped up into what these commanders and who these people were. And they're like, why do you let them influence you like that? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, your personality doesn't fit how you're handling this. And they helped me realize I had locked my identity into them because I wanted my career to be at that agency. And she was awesome, man. She helped me realize like, no, like, I think you're better than that. And so I transferred to a different agency, and it's been amazing. It was the best thing that I've mentally never been more happy than I am now, because I released. It's almost like it was a domestic violence situation where they were putting me down and I didn't realize it until I left, and it kind of like the burden was lifted off my shoulders. And I'm like, how do I go? I leave that agency because remember, I was on a task force, so I had double duty. I go in the task force and I'm on meetings with commanders and chiefs and sheriffs all over this area, and large people, and my opinion is valued, and I speak when spoken. It's like I'm a part of a good program, and yet I go back to my agency and they say sit down and shut up. I know. And so they were saying, why did you let them influence you? And it's like I didn't have an answer for them until I realized I just had to let it go. And once I realized that I stopped letting them provide my identity's in my family, it's in my God, and it's in me as a man and a person, it completely changed. And Heather and I kind of talked a lot about this, man. She's awesome. But we talked a little bit about this. It's just, I was able to just release a lot of that, what I was holding on to. So that's my moral code right now, is like, I will wear myself to death to get that message out to these people, whoever it is. And this platform that you've built it's crazy how grassroots it is, and yet how big it is now, and the amount of influence that it has. And it's just, I'm privileged to be a part of it and join the ride, whatever I got to do to help and build the team up. So.
Yeah. When we say influence, I mean, influence for the right reason. And I certainly lose context of the size of what this has grown to. That's a Dennis problem, because Dennis will never be satisfied. I'll be 86 and you'll be sitting around with me and you're going to say, what do you got? And I'm going to go play golf or something. I'm going to go, no, I'm working on this new thing because I heard, that's just who I am. So for me, it's hard for me to acknowledge because I feel like I have so much work to do, but I know that's a trait that's common in people, I think, who are built like me. But I appreciate you acknowledging that we've put work into it. For me, there's a lot of responsibility with it, but I'm glad that you spoke on leaving an agency and going to an agency and being happy with the decision, because a lot of people are hung up on that. And I'm still trying to psychologically understand why. people are willing to go and return to a place where they're being treated like shit or a relationship that's toxic, but don't leave. And it's not just in law enforcement. I see people doing this in their personal relationships. And I just don't think it's easier to stay. But people tell themselves that. I think it's easier to leave, but people just don't. I wish I understood the psychology of, like, I know humans don't want to change and there's a comfort. They're scared to change. Bro, I'm like, yo, I'm out. Like, fuck this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just so willing to pivot to continue to be happy in some sense. I don't run from my battles, but I've got to weigh into the account of, can I win a war even though I lose a battle? And if I can't win the war and the war is futile, well, then maybe it's time for me to go fight a different war. So for me, when I look at law enforcement, I may lose some battles here and there, and that's going to happen. There's no question about it. There's nothing I can do at times except do the best I can to win those battles. But the war is winnable. And the price of being in this war is worth it. It just is, because it's not about you or me. It's about human beings who deserve to have first responders and law enforcement professionals being capable, enthusiastic, and there for them when they need them the most. And if I can do anything to change that, I'm ready to lose some fucking battles.
Yeah. You know, that's a tactic called sleight of hand. You can let your enemy think that they've won this battle, but they don't know that you're amassing forces over here. So therefore they take solace and comfort. In all reality, what you're doing is you're setting them up for the kill. That's all it is, a sleight of hand of, hey, like I had somebody with that, one of my best friends tell me, he's like, you know, are you going after revenge or a lawsuit? Because I was told that I had absolute grounds for a lawsuit. The problem is I'm a white male, so I'm not a protected class.
Right.
And say, well, that doesn't make sense, but sounds good. So there was a lot of like identity thing around this. And so I had one of my buddies say, you know, the best way to defeat them is to beat them with success.
That's it.
And so I was like, you know what? That changed my perspective on it, because I was like, yeah, I can let them think they won this battle, but in all reality, I'm going to win the war. And the war is over my soul. Like to me, the war is for me and those that I'm around.
I'm going to give you one more that goes above that. Just who gives a fuck? I don't ever put thought, dude, like I don't put thought into like what my old agency or agencies before that think of me. I don't put thought into when you can release all of that and just not give a fuck. I mean, dude, listen, it was part of the Dennis Benigno story of where I worked. And I tell people, like, I worked at Auntie Anne's Pretzels when I was 14. I had a job, I had a supervisor there. Then I went on to work in other places, and then I had new supervisors. Your bosses are not my bosses. They're no different than my manager at Auntie Anne's Pretzels. It was a part of my life, and how you guys saw it versus how I saw it are two different things. It didn't line up the way that I anticipated. I thought I'd be the guy who was 65. They were going to be shoving out the door. I got injured unexpectedly. Never thought I was going to have to leave. Was told I had to leave. And there's a lot of emotions mixed in with going and experiencing something like that. But the reality is who gives a fuck? Who cares what they think? I have no interest. What I care about is the men and women who expect the men and women at street cop training to show up every single day and try to make their lives better. And that's what I care about. I honestly, with all my heart, couldn't care less what anybody thinks about me. I just don't give a fuck, because I know that I'm living my life morally correct and with the intention of helping other human beings. And I'm a human. I make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. But dude, that's the next level shit. Like, you can kill them with success, or you could just not give a fuck anymore. Like, don't even fucking worry about what they're thinking about your friends, your family. I just don't care. And it takes practice to get there. As much as I care about everybody else and being selfless and employing all these things that I think make us great human beings, for everybody else, like, I'm not fucking worried about what you're doing or what you're up to or what somebody said about me. I just don't. Like, people are like, hey, I was at this thing and this guy said some shit about you. And I'm like, I don't, like, sure. Thank you for telling me. I don't give a fuck. Yeah. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. I just don't give a fuck, because they make no difference in my life on how I'm going to live. This is my life. Yeah. This is Dennis Benigno's life. That's it. It's nobody else's. I'm not living my life according to how you see it, how you think I should act, how you think I should behave. I've made my choices. I've made right, wrong decisions. There's nothing I can do except just live my life. And dude, I put my head on the pillow every night knowing that, like, you know, I'm just a human being. I say things I shouldn't say sometimes. I do things I shouldn't do, but they're not with bad intention. Just it's how it is, dude. I'm human like everybody else. We all have fucking vices, and that's where a lot of non-judgment comes from. I don't want you to judge me, and just know that I don't judge you. I don't judge you. All right. I try to employ a lot of compassion. I don't judge anything that you've been through, decisions you've made. Try to figure out why, and then have compassion from there. It's a very, very powerful thing to do.
It's a great mentor thing. If you can find you people, if you can do that for the people that are underneath you, or even that aren't underneath you, you know, a lot of these dudes are leaders that they don't even have the bars or the stripes to do it, but they're still leaders. If they can learn to do that, they will set themselves up for success to help influence others. And we're talking about influence because we influence people whether we want to or not. We're not talking like the social media influencer of just like that kind of cliche thing that we have now in 2023. In this profession, we are very much influencers. We have influence on people. I mean, we have influence on everybody's life. So if they can adapt to that, I think they will find themselves a lot more happy, a lot more content, a lot more successful. I'm really excited for the big thing for me was going to be, how do I take, you know, street cops? By the way, your PowerPoint, that lesson that you taught me on PowerPoints was, I wish I would have known that forever ago. How to address and how to change PowerPoints. It's just one of those, like, it's that moment of like, oh my gosh, that's so much more simple. And I like it even more. But my question is that you and I had a long time, is how do you take a tactics class and draw it into a lecture? And what I'm excited for is that we found that happy medium of applying lecture-based, that's entertaining, that's knowledgeable, that provides that information, and then also ending it with the practicals of going outside and putting them through it. And then the big thing with this is going to be afterwards, when they have access to all of this stuff afterwards, of now they can go and how to set up trainings and scenarios and things they can do on the road, or if with their squad, you know, how do you set this up and kind of run these little 5-minute sub drills of like figuring this stuff out. That's where I'm really excited to showcase all of that to the street cop family and to the street cop audience, of addressing that. Because it's, you know, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's just teaching you how to utilize what we've been doing and stop doing all the BS and simplifying it. Like, I could say the best thing law enforcement could do is simplify what they've done. They've created that big monster that is so much policies and procedures and tactics in every way, shape, or form. Everybody's got an opinion, and we get so caught up in our egos rather than saying, what's the end goal? The end goal is to protect the public and property. If it doesn't do that, and if it's not simplifying that, then we don't need to do it. If it has to, you know, abide by policies and procedures, but more importantly, the Constitution, if it checks that, then we should simplify it. And if it complicates it, then get rid of it. It's like you say, it's that simple. It's that simple. So yeah, that's what I'm excited to do, man. When I talked to you a long time ago about it, I was like, man, is this really that going to be possible? Now it is. Looking forward to it. Actually booking my plane ticket to Jersey for August here this afternoon. So
you have to give me the date. Just text me when you get your dates on that, because then we'll get together and do some shit.
Yeah, I'll be out there. I'll come out early and I'll talk to you offline about that stuff, because I want to definitely kind of take a tour and see everything out there. And excited, man. Big deal.
All right, brother. Hey, listen, I got to run. Appreciate you being here. Just tell Frankie we'll do this again.
Yes, sir. Hey.
All right, Chance Cooper. See you, buddy. Hey guys, check out our upcoming training at streetcop.com. Don't forget, we have 50 instructors nationally teaching a variety of topics. These are the best classes you're going to experience in your career. We make sure of it. You're going to love it. I guarantee you're going to be thankful that you went. Check us out at streetcop.com for all upcoming classes in your area.